everybody, welcome back to Tavian's World of Reptiles. I hope you are all doing well and taking care of yourselves. No animals in this video as they are still pretty much digesting. But I did want to just talk a little bit about some stuff that I've been having going through my head, and I've been kind of thinking about a lot of the care guides that people will typically get for some of these different animals, and how a lot of them have kind of remained the same for several years. And in a lot of ways we've changed the way we do things, but also in a lot of ways we've kind of just kept things the way they are. And for some of these things, there are legitimate reasons for it. But I guess, for instance, I'm really wanting to talk a little bit more about like how we keep ball pythons today. Just kind of something I've been hearing a little bit about in some podcasts that I follow, and like reading some different things and watching videos, and just kind of got these thoughts going through my head. And I gotta say that we've kind of chosen to keep ball pythons in this very specific way, with the tubs and everything. And before I go on, I definitely want to let you know that this is not one of those videos where I'm like, boo to tubs or boo to enclosures or any of that. It's really not about either of that. It's more about like the reasonings why we are keeping our snakes in tubs. And I think it's about time that we kind of address that a little bit more. We've been hearing it for years on end, and I think it's time for us to think a little bit deeper into that. This is not to talk about breeders. There's absolutely 100% valid reasons for why a breeder who has hundreds upon hundreds of snakes at any given time coming and going would keep their snakes in these tubs. But I think the issues are really that private keepers who are not breeders, who just kind of have one or two or a few snakes, have kind of taken on these basic keeping strategies that breeders have, not just because that's what they see the breeders doing, but because of the very reasons that several of these breeders have given, or all of these breeders have given, which is all the very same thing that we've all been hearing for years when it comes to ball pythons, is like these tubs work for them because that they in the wild are often found in like termite mounds, tight spaces like such. And so these tubs simulate that sense of tight, secure, small space, which is 100% valid. They absolutely do simulate that tight, enclosed, dark space. But I think what's important to remember here for new people who are coming into the hobby, who are getting into snakes, who are choosing to keep their snakes in tubs specifically because of this reasoning, it's also important for us to remember that while it is fact that these snakes spend vast amount of time in these tight spaces, they don't spend all of their time in these spaces. And I think this little bit is what often gets forgotten, and I think it's important for us to remember that yes, these snakes do spend a lot of time tucked away in a termite mound, but they do have to come out to eat, and they have to find water, right? And sometimes they're pushed out of those particular mounds. So when a snake surfaces to go look for food, the chances of there being food just like right outside of that mound, so they can just eat that and go on back to sleep, is very unlikely. So the chances are that they're going to have to leave that particular mound and go some distance to actually find food. And then a lot of times, by the time they actually do find food, they're probably pretty far away from that last mound that they left, and they're all full now. So then now they've got to find something that's closer, and they usually end up finding another whole new mound to curl up in and chill out and digest in. Not including the fact that if they surface just for water, they may or may not have chosen a hole that is very close to water so that they could go back to that same one. But if not, especially during the different seasons of Africa, right? I'm sure there are rainier seasons and drier seasons, so sometimes they may have to travel further to find water, therefore leaving that one particular mound, finding water and finding another mound. Or if just something came along and decided it wanted to hole up in there and was brazen enough to actually to pester the snake until it left, then of course that's another reason why a snake might actually leave its mound and be forced to go look for a new space to hide up. So while these snakes do spend a huge amount of time actually in these mounds, there are several occasions where they are actually actively out moving around looking for food food, looking for water, looking for a new mound, and it is not spent all just holed up in one or two different holes for long just periods of time. It's just not logical. So, what I think is important to remember that if you are going to choose to keep your snake in the tubs because of that security sense, and not just that, but because it helps with humidity and keeps everything regulated a lot easier. All very valid things. I do not hate on people who keep their snakes in tubs, but just important to remember that they need that extra time out of the tub, not just for like a minute or two of looking them over, but like excessive amounts of time where they can come out, where you can hold them for maybe an hour or two, or actually put them out onto something where they can actually explore, where they have something to climb on for a bit, where they have things to kind of explore through and like tunnel through. Just kind of create a space for them to act in a way that they would in nature, where they can actually get out and move around and get that enrichment. Because it's okay to keep our snakes in tubs and stuff, but it's also important to realize that they don't spend all their time just sitting still. And I've kind of really noticed this a lot with my own ball python Zeus. He is currently in a tub right now, as well as my ball python Iro. They are both in tubs right now, and I got to tell you, there have been several nights that I will look up and I will see them just roving around their enclosure. And I'm not saying just moving from that one side with the hide over to the water, or moving from the one side of the hide to the other side of the hide. I mean literally like doing laps around their tubs, just like circling. And so sometimes, most of the time, if I have the energy and I see that happening, I will open the tubs and I'll allow them to just come out and explore, because they're obviously looking to do that. And this is not always just about times when they're time to feed, because usually this will happen within a couple of days after they feed. Now I know, for instance, Zeus, if he poops in one side of his thing, he will definitely keep moving around until he's forced to lay on the other side, and he will not go back to the other side until that poop is cleaned up. So I'm just saying that he's a lot more active than one would think, even in that tub, when I can see him in there just spinning laps. And if I open the door and he takes that advantage of it and just comes out and starts moving around, being really active at night, it just goes to show me that these animals, as though they do spend hours on end tucked away in their hides in a very tight little space that we provide for them, which is good, they also utilize and really enjoy the space to be able to come out and move around and stretch and wander a little bit, especially though they're in captivity. So maybe they don't have to go quite as far, obviously, for food and water, because we bring that directly to them and we have that in there available for them. So if you got a snake that's going to be moving around, roaming around, like I've noticed with Zeus and with Iro, that tells me that they're moving not just in search of some food or water, but because they want to, because they get everything they need in those tubs. And if they really wanted to, if they were seeking those things, then they would just stay right there. They know that that's where they get all those things from. But if I can provide them with so much more space and they utilize it, it just tells me that they actually they actually spend more time actually just moving around and roaming and trying to get some enrichment, and not just sitting in tight little spaces like termite mounds. So I think it's important for us to remember that while that is fact that they do spend lots of time in termite mounds, they can be much more active and can appreciate more enrichment than we are providing for them. Now, this is not to say that those of you who are keeping in tubs like myself should stop doing that, because Zeus is in a tub right now, though I do plan on getting him in a enclosure. I totally think it's valid for people to be okay with keeping their snakes in tubs, especially ball pythons, because of that security thing. But we also need to make sure that we're bringing them out and providing them with enrichment and things to climb on, and getting their bodies strong and active, and keeping them active, because they are definitely not the slugs that I think we kind of have visualized them being, and just something that just sits in a hole day in, day out for the rest of its life, when there's so much more to them than that. So I don't really want to keep going on. I'm definitely starting to repeat myself now, but yes, that's all. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you agree and have more to say about it, put that in the comments. If you disagree and have more to say about it, put that in the comments too. Otherwise, you all take care, love yourselves, love your loved ones, love your reptiles, and you guys keep spreading those herbs.